one's saying don't play football. No one, not one person in any of my stories, and never have I ever suggested that football should not be played. The question is what are the rules that should govern what you're allowed to do on a football field?
This is a discussion that's coming to the forefront, and I don't think it's a dialogue that went on 5 years ago and certainly didn't go on 10 years ago.
Technology caught up with football, and now we know the game comes with consequences.
He's gallant, he's heroic, he's gutsy. I want my kid to be like that. You might want your kid to be like that, but you probably don't want him to be dead.
Snap after snap and hit after hit, thousands of players put themselves at risk for a degenerative brain disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Even worse, CTE is not isolated only to football. It affects all athletes that play a contact sport. The entire world faces the biggest question in history of sport. Is it worth it? Welcome to the WEBN Sports Special, Concussed, the Sporting Epidemic. My name is Jordan Moncada. Advancements in medicine, science, and technology have changed our perception and have given us a deeper understanding of the world around us. We take that new knowledge and make necessary adaptations in order to better our own lives. Concussions have always been existent in contact sports. So is the terminal disease chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. CTE is believed to be caused by repeated trauma to the brain, including mild concussions and subconcussive blows. Sports Legacy Institute and the Boston University Medical Center is at the forefront of the study of CTE. Our reporter Dominique Banez is standing by live to tell us more on what they uncovered. Dominique?
Thanks, Jordan. CTE is a degenerative brain disease found in athletes and others who have a history of repetitive brain trauma. The trauma activates the degeneration or breakdown of brain tissues, including the abnormal protein called tau. The BU Center for the Study of Traumatic Encephalopathy, also known as CTSE, released a recent study about the cause and effects of the disease.
CTE looks when someone's alive. We have an idea, but the diagnosis has to be made post-mortem.
Dan Dashavar is one of the graduate researchers at BU's CTSE. He works with Dr. Cantu at the center to discover the main causes of the disease. And Dashavar tells us that those causes are no longer limited to contact sports.
CTE has been diagnosed in individuals beyond individuals with athletic exposure and military. It's been diagnosed in a couple of individuals who had epilepsy and had repetitive head banging disorder, so they would just repetitively hit their head against a wall, and they ended up developing CTE. We diagnosed one individual like that in our center here. It's been diagnosed in 2 battered spouses. Basically, they had, again, repetitive brain injury. But it doesn't really matter what the actual insult is that's causing the brain injury. As long as someone's getting this repetitive concussive or subconcussive injury, they seem to be at risk for getting CTE.
The causes of CTE come in all different forms, but contact sports such as boxing and football are still the leading causers of the disease. And BU researcher Christine Baugh believes there are ways to reduce the trauma for future athletes.
To take some of those contact practices out. There have been studies that have shown that kids, high school kids, take between 1,000 and 1,500 hits per season. Hits at the force that's equivalent to a car running into a brick wall at 35 miles an hour, which is a big hit. And that's 1,000 to 1,500 of those per season. So if we can do what we can to eliminate some of those, more than half of them come from practice. We can eliminate some of those that aren't necessary. We're reducing the incidence, hopefully, of CTE down the line.
Just as Christine Baugh mentioned, the BU Center continues to find new ways to prevent further trauma in athletes. Organizations such as the NFL and the NFLPA have donated to the center and encourage other athletes to participate. Reporting live in WEBN's Research Center, I'm Dominique Banez for WEBN Sports.
Thanks, Dominique. Coming up, WEBN's Pat Welter sat down with one of the directors of the biggest concussion advocacy groups in Massachusetts. The recent discoveries on concussions are so new that many people aren't aware of just how serious they can be. Many organizations like the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts support those who have experienced traumatic brain injuries and serve as advocacy groups to promote a safer environment. Pat Welter spoke with BIA's Manager of Prevention, BJ Williams.
BJ, I want to thank you first for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was watching the games this weekend, and it's hard to watch for more than 5 minutes without hearing someone mention concussions. And I think of the moms and the dads out there and wanting their kids whether or not to play football or not, and it makes me wonder, is the sport of football in jeopardy? So do you worry about football long term?
I don't think of it being in jeopardy. I see it as having more of just an awareness and an understanding to it. A big thing arose with when the Pop Warner rumor that has come out with the individuals, multiple individuals who were hurt at a younger age, and it stems into the coaches, the parents, the individuals who are associated with the sport. Doesn't even have to be football, it can be any contact sport. Just having an understanding of what concussions are and playing safe instead of going out there and having what they call the bounties on each other and trying to go out and hurt each other, but just playing within the rules and playing with safety instead of leading with your head when you're hitting or trying to just hit someone in the head and go back to the way sports are meant to be played. Then the sport will remain at what it is, of being safe and being a sport that we can play.
Yeah, I think they definitely made strides in implanting different rules, regulating what kind of hits are acceptable and encouraging that behavior. But I think back to that football's been around since like the 1890s. Why has it taken so long for us to see the dangers in this game?
I agree with you. It feels like we just hit the tip of the iceberg of just starting to see really how the effects can come from concussions. And I mean, research is just continually being done, whether it's through the equipment, whether the individuals feeling different impacts that they've never felt. But I think it's more of the players finally coming forth and speaking about their injuries. It's kind of the mindset. If you feel all right, if you can tell how many fingers I'm holding up, you're good to go. It really doesn't come down to that. It's maybe looking more into the minor details of the onset effects, the longer term effects. And players are now speaking up about what they're feeling, and it's really making a dramatic impact on seeing the different individuals. Ted Johnson being one, being a New England Patriot, retired New England Patriot. He really has kind of pushed the start of it and really showing what players are feeling and really how they're being impacted for the long term.
Even now that players are coming out and speaking about their injuries, I still think that the culture of football is kind of a tough guy mentality. Don't talk about your injuries. I think one way we can prevent that is just giving them better equipment. But some will say that better equipment just lets players hit harder, play harder. So is the equipment that's coming out now actually protecting our football players?
It's a good question. For how you say the equipment now is allowing players to play, or they think, more dangerous, more rough. I agree. I've heard that from a lot of medical professionals in the concussion world. That's what a lot of them continually say. Can that be the truth? Absolutely. We can make helmets stronger. We could even go out and bubble wrap ourselves, but it's not going to protect you against concussions and the brain being damaged. It can lessen the impact really to the head or the body being hit, but it's not going to make it so we can be invincible to concussions. That's the downfall to it. But then again, if we went out there without any helmets or the old helmets that they had when football started, concussions would probably still be at the same level. So it's still more in the study fields right now for the equipment companies and the professionals in the field of understanding the injuries that happen on the field to really be the ones to figure if that's the truth behind it or not.
Sure. I mean, there's only so many things we can control. But here in Massachusetts, legislation has come in to try to control it where they can. And schools now are required to report concussions, educate their players and coaches. Do you feel that those laws are sufficient for what we need in sports that have had injuries?
Yeah, I mean, we were in the top 10 to really start and push the law when it first came out for the states in the country. We've been a good, strong push for that. It was tough to get the law passed from what I hear, but from when the law has got into effect, it's gotten the education out there to the student athletes, to the coaches, many coaches who never knew about concussions or played early on in the 70s, maybe early 80s when concussions weren't known, so they have a whole different mindset to it. Can it be strengthened? Absolutely. I feel one of the biggest side effects that we experience at the Brain Injury Association is we hear a lot about teachers having trouble with students returning back to the classroom. So after the concussions, coaches, nursing, maybe even some of the administrators might have an understanding to the effects of a concussion, but teachers are still, what we experience in our field of work, are still the ones who kind of don't have a full understanding. Just because the student's in the classroom doesn't mean that they can fully take on all the tests, all the reading, all the papers. So maybe there is a lot more that can be done. Once again, the thing I stand behind strongly is saying we hit the tip of the iceberg. There's still so much out there to understand. Some states do it one way, others do it another. Some don't even implement it or even try for it. So there's definitely growing, learning, things to change, things to work with. But it's really with the medical professionals, specifically in Boston, I feel a lot of them are really the head starters around the state to getting the education out there and even across the country from Boston. So they're the ones who really we can kind of branch off of and work with to get the understanding and probably a better feel of what we can change and what we can make stronger and better in Massachusetts for that law.
Sure, I guess awareness is the first step to finding a solution. I'd love to talk to you more about this. It's such an interesting topic and so relevant today in sports. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But if you'd like to learn more out there, learn more about what BJ is doing at the Brain Injury Association of Massachusetts, you can check it out at biama.org.
Up next, we will show you the latest advancements in sports medicine, and we will go to the Gridiron, where WEBN's very own Joy Powers is live. Stay with us. Welcome back. The sport that has become the scapegoat of the concussion discussion is football. Football is one of the most popular and violent sports played today, but it is taking the most heat for disregarding player safety. Joy Powers is live at Madison Park in Boston to explain the game's latest rule changes.
Thanks, Jordan. The game of football is going through a complete transformation. Safety is becoming the main priority, and the Gridiron has been at the center of these changes. League officials, the NCAA, and state administrators seem to finally be realizing what's most important on the field: the players.
The primary reason why the NFL mattered, the actions and statements of their players and of their doctors influenced the treatment of children. And not 20 children, but 4 million. And that's why they're finally paying attention to what had been a silent problem, a problem that either people didn't understand or they didn't want to understand.
Frank Spaziani is the head coach of the Boston College football team. After a devastating hit to one of his players, he was asked if he agreed with the NCAA's emphasis on safety.
Yeah, I do. To be honest with you, I don't know whether that was or not. I'll have to look at the tape. I'm sure, 50 people look at it, 25 will say yay, 25 will say no. But I think with the concussions and everything, the way it's going, if they try to be consistent, which the officials are trying to do a good job, but it's a tough call to make, I think it's good for football.
When it comes to head-on collisions, everyone is changing their rules. The NCAA is imposing a new safety rule that states football student athletes who target the head and neck area of defenseless players will continue to be penalized for initial contact with a forearm, elbow, shoulder, or helmet. A 15-yard penalty is enforced on these violations. For obvious violations, officials may remove the offending player from the game.
Kids take concussions more seriously today. Parents do, and coaches do, and leagues do. The NFL, probably still has a long way to go. They're in a difficult position, and their profits and their entire business rests on the appeal of watching grown men run headlong into each other.
Currently, the National Football League can fine players for illegal hits. They can also suspend the player if the hit is too severe. But many people say these changes start on the high school level. High school coaches have a responsibility to teach kids how to tackle both effectively and safely. New laws have been imposed in several states regarding concussions. In each state, players will not be allowed to return to gameplay until a doctor says they're fully recovered. Live in Boston for WEBN Sports, I'm Joy Powers.
Thanks, Joy. Once a person has a concussion, there are specific treatments that help the symptoms, but there is a push to attack concussions at the front end before they happen instead of the back end or after they occur. Dr. Lyle McKaylee and Dr. William Meehan are opening up a new center specifically for sports injury prevention. Our reporter Joelle David tells us more about this new center.
Dr. William Meehan and Dr. Lyle McKaylee have come together to open up the McKaylee Center for Sports Injury Prevention.
Dr. McKaylee felt like we weren't really doing enough to prevent athletes that we've never met, never lectured to, and never seen us prevent their injuries. He said we should be trying to prevent all sports injuries, not just ours. And he didn't feel like we were doing enough to do it. And so the center was his idea, a way to come up with, reach out to athletes who have not been injured, or at least not seen us for injury, and see can we prevent them from being injured in the first place.
The center will be located at Children's Mercy Hospital in Waltham, and it will specialize in giving individual care on a case-by-case basis.
The center, when an athlete comes in and says, hey, I want to be evaluated to find out my risk for injury, we measure tons and tons of variables on them. I mean, probably 50 to 100 variables on every athlete coming through the center. Part of the center's goal is to do ongoing surveillance of all the athletes who've trained at the center and find out who gets injured and who doesn't. And then go back and look at all the things we measured and find out what was the difference between those athletes that got an injury and those that didn't.
Dwayne Sigsbury is the athletic director at Cathedral High School, and he says that these kinds of centers can help student athletes.
I believe it is a good idea because it's obviously to help the well-being of a student athlete. I think centers like that are positive for the sport. I don't think they're trying to hurt the sport. I do think they're trying to protect the young men and women as far as being safe and not getting concussions out of stupidity.
The new center will also have a concussion clinic to help athletes recover and prepare for any type of traumatic brain injury.
And so what we offer is not only tips about how to prevent injury, but concussion preparation. We offer you a standardized balance assessment, a computerized neurocognitive assessment, so that if you sustain a concussion, all that information has been collected beforehand and we can more closely monitor your recovery.
The McKaylee Center here at the Children's Hospital in Waltham is set to open in March 2013. The center seeks to specialize in sports-induced concussions as well as other forms of injury prevention. Reporting for WEBN Sports, I'm Joelle David.
Football is the main focus of the talk of concussions, but it's not the only one. After the break, Angeline Vo explains why it's not just football players who are at risk for concussions. Welcome back. When you hear someone had a concussion, you might think that person is a boxer or a football player. Concussions are common with these types of athletes, but other athletes shouldn't be forgotten. Our reporter Angeline Vo spent some time with a volleyball player who suffered from a concussion, and she tells us how the injury has affected her.
It was definitely an audible smack. Like, everyone in the room stopped what they were doing and was like, is she okay?
This is Kelly Lynn. And the audible smack she's talking about is the sound of the volleyball hitting her in the face during a game with her travel team. This happened a year and a half ago. Kelly had suffered from a concussion because of that play, but now she's 15 years old and as mature as can be given her circumstances.
And it would be all over my head, and I also had really bad neck pain too, and shoulder pain, and it was basically in my head. It would always be pounding or stabbing or really pressury or achy.
But Kelly was able to heal from that first accident. It took about a month to do so, but it seemed Kelly had more to lose than to gain from the injury.
The fact that I couldn't really do anything, like I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read books, I couldn't do homework, I wasn't allowed to text or be on the computer, which was really, really difficult for any teenager, I guess.
Once Kelly had healed from her first concussion, Kelly tried out for her high school volleyball team. She became the first freshman to make the varsity team at Neshoba High School, more of an accomplishment than any of the veterans could have bragged about.
It was just total happiness. Like, I loved it. There was no other greater feeling in the world for me.
But midway through her season, she suffered yet another concussion, and this time with an even longer lasting impact. Kelly was out of the game for good, doctor's orders.
I remember I was in the appointment and I was like, trying to hold back tears almost, because it was like something that I loved was being taken away from me. It wasn't a choice. It was completely out of my control. I couldn't do anything to stop it.
But Kelly wasn't the only one affected by her concussions. Her family might as well have taken the same hit to the head too, because a family that took frequent vacations and ate out at restaurants was now a family in the dark.
she's not able to be a part of our family unit. We went from a family where we're loud, you can tell, probably hear them around and about, and to it was quiet and all the lights were off and the TV was off.
Because even this sound of Kelly's younger sister playing a simple tune on their piano would hurt her.
When she had her first concussion back when she was in 8th grade, my initial one was, all right, it's just a concussion.
And that is where many parents are wrong. One of the biggest misconceptions about concussions is that if it's not a contact sport, the severity of the concussion is mild. But if proper safety measures aren't taken when dealing with concussions, it can lead to a longer, more fatal condition called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. So think about Alzheimer's. CTE is 10 times worse than that. And Dr. Robert Cantu says any athlete who's had repetitive brain trauma like Kelly is susceptible to CTE's wrath.
Yeah, chronic traumatic encephalopathy is a progressive neurodegenerative brain disorder, just like, but neuropathologically very distinct from Alzheimer's disease. So it's a disease that once it starts, it almost always is relentlessly progressive from that point forward.
Victims of this aggressive disease could suffer from memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulsive control problems, aggression, depression, and eventually progressive dementia. And Dr. Cantu admits that this is a newer conversation, something that athletes definitely wouldn't have thought about 5, maybe 10 years ago.
No, we right now don't have a therapy or a medicine or a treatment regimen that retards or stops CTE. We have treatments that we can direct toward the symptoms and improve the quality of life. The journey is underway. For every question that we may have answered, there are tenfold unanswered questions. So we're just beginning this journey.
While Dr. Cantu begins to find answers for CTE, Amy Lynn is still trying to find answers for her helpless daughter.
And not being able to take that pain away is what kills me. And I think in the beginning I was so mad. What I'm realizing is they can't take her pain away. Like I think in 2012 that they should be able to take her pain away because, you know, we can cure cancer and we can, you know, do all these other things. Why can't we take her pain away?
I was one of those people that thought concussions weren't a huge deal. It's a knock on the head, like just kind of suck it up, and now I'm like completely different.
As a parent, you can look back and you can be like, should I have done that? Or I mean, I remember sitting in the stands during that game against Air and looking at her and saying to my husband, she's got another concussion. And Kelly looking up at me at that moment and being like, I'm okay, Mom, I'm okay. Like it was almost like she knew and I knew at that moment. When she gets out of this and when she's pain-free, watch out, world, because she's going to go crazy, because whatever she decides to put her mind to, she's going to soar. And I think because of this, you know, I wouldn't change this because I know that this is the way that God has planned for her.
Since Kelly can't be on the courts, she's teamed up with the Brain Injury Association as an ambassador. She's taking her unfortunate experiences and sharing them, hoping that others who suffer from concussions will take them as seriously as she does now. Whether or not Kelly will play volleyball again is still uncertain, but it all seems to go back to one question. Is the game worth it? For WEBN, I'm Angeline Vo.
The NFL has donated over $100 million to concussion research. However, over 120 former players are suing the league for millions, claiming they have ignored players' safety. Either way, someone is going to have to pay for the concussions, whether it's with their money or their lives. This has been the WEBN Sports Special, Concussed, the Sporting Epidemic. I'm Jordan Moncada. Thank you for watching.